IDOLM STER Cinderella Girls collab set is out now in English, and it's time for the long-awaited competitive deck, so let's jump right into it. And today we have a lot. I'm not only going to go over a deck for each of the main classes, but I'm actually going to show you 5 different IDOLM STER decks. So especially if you're just getting into Shadowverse Evolve and you picked up one of the IDOLM STER starter decks, then this is going to be the video to watch for you, so you don't want to miss out. Getting into it, we're going to start off with the best of the best in my opinion, which is Cool IDOLM STER. So if you don't know, IDOLM STER comes in 3 different types, which is cool, cute, and passion. So cool here is basically the aggressive, fast kind, and they ended up really cooking with this archetype and making a very strong deck that honestly is very cheap to upgrade from the starter deck. Like basically the majority of this deck comes from the starter deck and you just need a couple like GRs and below from the set. So the game plan starts off with really strong early game plays. By the way, even if you're not planning to play this deck, you should really be listening because you're going to play against this deck in BCS a lot. Generally, turn 1, Cool IDOLM STER likes to play Hojo Karen, who's a 1-cost 3/2 that unfortunately has to ping herself 1 damage if you don't have any other cool followers in the field. You might be thinking, oh, then I don't want to play her when there's nothing else in the field, but on turn 1, if you play her, she's still a 3/1 that can just swing to your opponent's face next turn. Alternatively, you can also play Takafuji Kako, who's a 1-cost 2/2, so basically a goblin in stats that evolves for 2, and just for evolving, she becomes a 3/3, but if you have an extra 3 play points to pay, then she also deals 3 damage to the enemy leader. The most efficient use of this is that if you play her early and the opponent kind of ignores her, down the line you can just kind of like evolve her, and then she basically is going to do 6 damage face from evolving and also having the damage. So that's kind of like the early game plays, but the general mid game plan centers around Shiburin. So Shibuya-rin, 3-cost 3/3 the Storm that on Fanfare says if you have 3 cool followers or more on your field, she gives another follower with 3 attack or less on your field Storm. So this means that if you, for example, play a 1-drop with 3 attack or less and then play Shibuya-rin, then she will give that follower Storm as well. And you can pay 1 and do lesson 1, which if you're using the IDOLM STER class, you start with 5 of the lessons in your EX area, so you just get rid of 1 of the 5 that you start with. She gets +1 attack, so a very easy to use effect just to make her a 4-attack Storm. But if she was just a Storm follower, that wouldn't be that crazy, right? She's powered up by Kamiya Nao, which is the 5-cost 3/3 that on Fanfare looks at the top 5 of your deck and chooses 2 cool followers from among them that add up to 4 cost or less, summons them, and the rest goes to the bottom of your deck. So in an optimal case scenario, you're actually finding both Shibuya-rin and Hojo Karen off of this, and then Hojo Karen is a 3/2 in stats, and the Shibuya-rin will give the Hojo Karen the Storm, so you're swinging with 6 damage. If you use Shibuya-rin's lesson, it's going to be 7 damage. Hojo Karen also has a lesson but costs 3 play points to give each follower in your field +1 attack. So especially if you've built a board and then managed to play this and still have spare play points, it can really finish off the game. So you basically are just aggressing early quite a lot with these pieces. And if you get to the late game, you have Sagisawa Fumika, who is a 7-cost 4/4 that searches your deck for a 3 and 1-cost follower and summons them. And every time you would play an IMAS follower, she deals an enemy follower 2 damage. So she basically wipes out your opponent's board while you play stuff, which means that it's easy to clear out wards that might be standing in your way. And she can also bring out this combo of Shibuya-rin and Hojo Karen. But that's not all. There's actually more consistency with Shimamura Uzuki. She's a 3-cost 3/3 that on Fanfare lets you lesson 1 to heal your leader 1. You can sometimes ignore this, but sometimes the heal 1 does save you. But the most important part is that she evolves for 1 to become a 4/4 and search your deck for a Shibuya-rin or Honda Mio, put it to the EX, and then it costs 2 less play points to play that turn. And Honda Mio is exactly 2 play points, so she's a 2/1 Storm that on strike, if you have the Uzuki Shimamura on your board, then she gets +1 defense. But if Shibuya-rin is on the field, then she gets +1 attack. So for example, you can have, the Shimamura Uzuki can search out the Honda Mio, and then if you already had the Shibuya-rin with Storm on the board, then you have another 3 Storm damage coming out from Honda Mio. Honda Mio is also a really good card, just play on turn 2 and Storm to the face as well. And there's another Shibuya-rin you can search from this, which is a 4/4/4 with Ward that has 2 fanfares. First one is if you have a Shimamura Uzuki, then she deals 5 damage to an enemy follower, but if you have Honda Mio on the board, she deals 5 damage to the enemy leader directly to the face. You can play Honda Mio, play the Shibuya-rin, deal 5 to the face, and then Honda Mio attacks, and on strike is another attack, so that's basically 8 damage in 1 turn. So you have really high consistency in this deck because you have so much deck search. There's also Okazaki Yasuha, who's a 4-cost 4/4 that searches your deck for a cool follower that costs 2 or less and summons it. Honda Mio, of course, is one of the targets there, but we actually have a lot of really strong 2-drops and 3-drops that help to answer the board and just kind of adapt to the opponent's game plan. So Matsuo Chizuru, for example, is a 2/2/3 that on Fanfare gives another cool follower +1 attack, so you can turn turn 1 play Hojo Karin and turn 2 buffer to 4 and then just swing face. Your opponent being on 16 defense on turn 2 is definitely not going to give you the biggest of smiles, but still, it's pretty strong. And when Matsuo is taken out, she also gives another +1 attack to another cool follower. So she's a really pesky target on the board for your opponent. You can also search out Kamiya Nao, who is a 2-cost 2/3 with fanfare. If you have 3 Idolmaster followers on your field, then she deals 2 damage to an enemy follower. So especially in the early game and in the mirror match, it's going to be very important to like kind of trade away your opponent's pieces. And the other 2-cost target here is Sajo Yukimi, who's a 2-cost 2/2 that on fanfare lets you pay 2 extra play points and 1 lesson to give herself +1/+1, which you rarely really do. You usually just pay the play point to evolve her, and her evolve is one of the best in the deck. She selects another cool follower in the field and gives it +1 attack, rush, and assail. So if Okazaki Yasuha plays her out and then you evolve her because you went second, for example, then the Yasuha becomes a 5/4 with rush and assail. So that basically can take out even the taller boards that your opponent might be leaving up. And finally, there's the Kanade Hayami, who's a 3-cost 3/3 that evolves for 1, and she costs less than 2 in evolve to choose an enemy follower in the field and deal it 4 damage. But this is very good because it answers most threats in the meta still. And so overall, the cool deck just kind of adds up into this very cohesive package where you have really strong early game aggro that pairs well into more aggro on like turns 2 or 3, or if you're playing against another board-based deck, you have a lot of ways to answer their board. Then you spend the mid-game kind of like searching out stuff while still giving pressure to your opponent, whether it's from your Uzuki search or whether it's from your Kamiya Nao search. And then if the game gets long, then you have Sagisawa Fumika to basically just like search out more pieces and just overwhelm your opponent. So Cool is definitely the deck that I want to spend most time talking about because this will be one of the most commonly seen decks, I think, going into the BCS season, just because it's very cheap to build. Like in Japan, this was notorious for being a deck that you could basically, it was a tier 1 deck you could build for 3,000 yen, which is like barely over $20, I think, in the US. That's just how cheap it was, especially initially. I think literally the card that was hardest to get was the evolved form of Shimamura Uzuki, but everything else was basically just out of the starter deck. But anyway, there are 2 more types and 2 more trial decks. So moving on, we have Cute. Cute is a much slower deck. It's actually much more focused on self-sustaining, healing, answering your opponent's board. It plays around the boss card that is Shimamura Uzuki, this time a 7-cost 4/4, that on fanfare lets you select a Cute follower that costs 4 or less and a Cute follower that costs 2 or less in your cemetery, summon them back to the field, and give them +1/+1 each. And she also lets you pay 1 lesson to heal your leader 3 once per turn. So that's also pretty good. You usually want to use that effect because it doesn't cost any other play points or anything. But what kind of 4 and 2 play point cards do we want to actually revive here? So Igarashi Kyoko is the one from the starter deck. That's a 4-cost 4/4 with ward that basically on fanfare will give -1/-1 to one of your opponent's followers for every Cute follower in the field. So even at a base minimum, usually this will be like -3/-3. And you can pay an extra lesson to do that again, essentially, but only a 1/1. So in case you need to just finish off an opponent's follower. So basically just a good way to clear out your opponent's board. Also, especially when you play against stuff that like doesn't take damage from effects, like this isn't damage, it's a reduction in stats. So this gets around those effects pretty well too. In terms of 2 drops, my biggest recommendation is Shiina Noriko. She's a 2-cost 2/3 that on fanfare says if you have 3 IMAS followers on your field, she gets +1 attack and rush. And on strike, she heals your leader 2. And this is a really annoying to your opponent because they're having to deal with a 3/3 rush that if they don't take out is going to keep healing. And you're also going to keep reviving her too. So it's actually just gets more and more annoying and you keep healing. Like average Cute games, usually they heal up beyond 30 defense so much that games just go to time. So honestly, be very careful when playing both with and against this deck. And you have a lot of other like just strong stat sticks. Like honestly, I feel like one of the most underestimated ones is Yokoyama Chika. She's a 1-cost 2/2 that on fanfare says if you have 5 Cute cards or more in your cemetery, she gets +1 attack, +2 defense, and ward. 3/4 in stats with a ward and also just a 1-drop? Like this card really seemed crazy to me from the very beginning. In terms of other good revival targets, Akari Tsujuno is a really strong card that is also a Cute trait. 4-cost 4/5 with ward that heals your leader 3, and if you have the 10 maximum play points, also deals 3 damage to the enemy leader. And whenever she would take 5 or more damage, you also get an extra play point. So you can basically just like play her out, ward her up, and then if your opponent, you know, tries to swing just one big thing into her or just take her out with 5 damage, which there is quite a bit of in this meta, then you're going to get a play point from it. So it's kind of annoying for them as well. If you have an evolve point, there's also Imai Kana. She's a 2/2 that is a vanilla, but if you evolve her, she looks at the top card of your deck and lets you reveal add it to your hand. And if you reveal the Cute card, she heals your leader 2. So you notice a lot of this like sustain effects coming up here and there. There's also Ikebukuro Akiha, who's a 3-cost 3/3 that gives another cute follower +1 defense, and if you evolve her for 1, she lets you discard a cute card to deal 3 damage to an enemy follower and draw a card, so you don't actually lose cards. In terms of damage, you also have the 5-cost 3/4, the Kurihara Nene. She's Ward and Fanfare, basically deals 3 damage to enemy follower. She's also eating a banh mi, which funnily enough, I actually had a banh mi for lunch today, so shoutouts to that, I guess. She also evolves for 1 play point and lets you pay 3 extra play points to actually revive a cute follower from your cemetery. What's crazy about this card is that, okay, you're paying 9 play points in total for all this, but you're reviving your Shimamura Uzuki, who is then reviving 2 more cards, so you're basically building a whole full board and healing a bunch as well at the same time. These lists that I'll be introducing in this video are mostly ones that did well at Japanese tournaments during this meta last year in Japan, and I really like the one of inclusion of Moroboshi Kirari in this list. So she's a passion trait, but she's a 9-cost 9/9 with Ward that costs 3 less to play if you have a 1-cost follower in the field, which, you know, we have quite a few in this deck. So she's a 6-cost 9/9 in that sense with Ward and Fanfare. Refresh each follower on your field. So you can basically just like swing with everything and then just play her, refresh everything and swing again, which is very, very strong in my opinion. Speaking of passion followers, Otsuki Yui is going to be popping up in a lot of these lists, being a 4-cost 3/3. Fanfare lets you lessen 1 to deal 4 damage to enemy follower, which is actually very good. But if you spend 2 more play points, that's where the good stuff comes from. She Unevolve lets you search your deck for either a spell or amulet that costs 3 or less, put it to the EX area, shuffle your deck, and then you can play that for 3 less. And also she's a 5/5, which is like pretty crazy in stats, considering she comes off from a 3/3 pre-evolve. So the main targets you usually search are Center Street. This is a 3-cost quick spell that lets you choose an enemy follower in the field, deal it 5, and if you have a passion follower in the field, draw a card. So in most times you are going to be using this to board clear and also draw cards, so that way your resources aren't running out either. But we do play the one of My Life, My Sounds, which is a normal spell, no quick timing here, that just simply destroys an enemy follower, and if you happen to be in Sanguine, then it also deals 2 damage to its leader. Mostly just use it for the destruction here. But then we also have the amulet, Classroom Lily, that on Fanfare heals your leader 2 and draws a card, so whenever you need that extra sustain, you can go for it. And then quick timing, you can pay 2 and engage and bury this card to choose an IMAS follower in your cemetery and add it back to your hand. So that way you can basically adapt to various situations, and for example, if you don't have the Kurihara Nene, you can just get the Shimamura Uzuki back to your hand and then replay it. And so overall, there's a lot of cool synergy in this deck. Anyway, I'm spending way too much time just talking about these 2 decks, and we've gotten this far in the video already. But first, we have to talk about type 3 here, which is Passion. Passion is, I would say, if I have to say it, it is of the 3, the lowest rated one, at least it was in Japan. But I think it can definitely still fight, although it definitely has a bit more luck element added to it. The boss card from the trial deck is Honda Mio, who has Rush on a 6-cost 5/5 body that on Fanfare looks at the top 2 of your deck and summons a passion follower from among them and buries the rest. And you can do that again if you pay 2 play points and lessen 2. It's actually not once per turn as well, so if you do have 10 play points, you can technically use this effect 3 times in 1 turn. So in terms of high roll, your best targets are Hino Akane, which is an 8-cost 7/7 with Storm, and Fanfare lessen 3 and discard 2 passion cards, deals 6 to all enemy followers and draws 2, so it's basically a board wipe. So if you manage to find her off the top 2, you're doing 7 damage face immediately, which is really, really good. You can also find the previously mentioned Moroboshi Kirari, who's a 9/9 with Ward and refreshes everything on your board. And there's actually good synergy with Kirari in this deck with Takamori Aiko, who's a 4-cost 4/4 that lets you engage 3 passion followers on your field to summon a passion follower from your hand, but it goes back to your hand during the end phase. So you can basically use that to bring out the Kirari and then, you know, basically refresh everything, including anything you might have attacked with before that. Otherwise, we see a lot of familiar faces here, like the Otsuki Yui with the Central Street combo. You're noticing Kitami Yuzu in a lot of these lists, but I'm purposefully holding out on talking about her until we get to the last of the Idol Master deck list where she really shines. In terms of other passion exclusives, we have Takamori Aiko, who is a Fanfare, 3-cost 2/2, looks at top 3, adds a passion to hand, puts the rest to bottom, and evolves for 1 to summon a passion follower that costs 3 or less from hand. This lets you get stuff like Aiba Yumi out, who is a 3-cost 3/3 that lets you deal 2 damage to enemy follower if you have 3 passion followers in the field, and if you evolve her, she also lets you bot deck an opponent's follower with 3 defense or less. So bot decking something is usually the best form of removal. There's also technically the 3-cost Shin Sato, 3-cost 3/3 Fanfare draw card, and on evolve for 6, she lets you revive in 8-cost or lower, so that immediately brings out the Hino Akane, and you know, the Shin Sato is already pretty good on stats, but then a 7/7 that board wipes with Storm is also quite good. So you can see there's also a pretty late game focused deck. You do have a couple early aggro cards, like Natalia is a 2-cost 1/3 with Storm that does a bit of damage to your opponent's board as well. But otherwise, it's definitely the kind of deck that takes its time, except it doesn't really have the sustain that Cute has. But it's still a fun deck, so I definitely do recommend messing around with it. And then one other cool build I want to feature real quick is this one, which is a mid-range version of Cool. So you do see the majority of the cards here are the same. We've actually cut out the Uzuki from this list. But basically we have the Otsuki Yui here to search out Center Street and just provide a bit of sustain to the deck. You can technically play more copies as well, but honestly it's not really the biggest deal. But Layla is one of the big parts of this deck, being a 4-cost 4/4 that is a vanilla until she evolves for 1. And when she does evolve, you get to search your deck for a Cool and a Passion follower and add them to your hand. This is a huge consistency boost to the deck because now you're able to search out like your Nao, you can search out your Rin, your Sagisawa Fumika as well, and also your Otsuki Yui to like answer your opponent's boards and whatnot as well. So it's a bit more of a mid-range build, and it's definitely, this one was very popular as well during the GP of this season too. But the final build for Idol Master before we get into the 5 main classes, which I will try to blaze through, is Combo Idol Master. So Engawa, one of the best players in Japan, actually played this deck a lot during this meta and was the one that really popped it up. And then one of the Shadowverse app pro players that was playing Evolve very actively during this time, Rigze, made a whole 20-minute feature video on the combos you can do with this deck, which I'll link in the description, but I'll explain what they are in this section too. Combo Idol Master features Anastasia. This card is busted, by the way. It's going to be insane in Forestcraft for many months to come. She's a 5-cost 2/4 that on Fanfare recovers 2 play points. So basically she's a 3-cost 2/4 that just doesn't let you play her until turn 5 or later. And whenever you would play a card this turn, if it's the 3rd or more, you recover another 2 play points. Now she's a 1-cost 2/4, and if you've played 5 on the 5th play, she buffs everything on your field with +1/+1. So now she's a 3/5 for 1, and it's really easy to build the combos with this card. So for example, you get to 5 play points, you play Anastasia, and then you now have 2 play points left, right? You play Kitami Yuzu, who has it's a 1-cost 1/1 with ward that has a lesson effect to choose a cost 1 or lower card on your field that isn't herself and bounce it back to your hand. And then for the last play point, you're going to play Tachibana Arisu, who's a 1-cost 1/1 that says if you have 3 or more Idolmaster followers on your field, she searches your deck for a 1-cost spell or amulet and adds it to your hand. And now you've played 3, so Anastasia's first effect kicks in to put you back up to 2 play points. Now you're going to be able to play Momoi Azuki, who's a 4-cost 3/5 that just has ward, but she says if you have 3 Idolmaster followers on your field, she only costs 1. So now keep in mind, right? You have Anastasia, who's a 2/4. You have 2 1/1s that are both, 1-drops that are 1/1, and you have Azuki, who is a 3/5. And that was the 4th card you played, and you still have a play point left. So now you can choose to play Goddess by the Sunlit Sea, which you search from the Tachibana Arisu. That lets you draw a card and also recover a play point because you have a 5-cost follower on the board, which is the Anastasia. So now it's the 5th card you played that turn, so now Anastasia buffs everything by 1/1. Anastasia's a 2/5, your 1/1s are 2/2s, and your Azuki is now a 4/6. And you did that all on turn 5 going first using no evolve points. You can also, instead of using Goddess, you can use Brand New Beat, which is an amulet that when you remove it from play, as long as a magical item was banished from your EX area this turn, basically by using a lesson, you draw a card. So what you can do is you can play Anastasia, then play the Yuzu, then play the Arisu. So the start of the play line is still pretty similar. Arisu searches out the Brand New Beat, and now we have 2 play points from Anastasia. You play Brand New Beat, you use Kitami Yuzu to bounce it back to hand, and then her effect procs to draw an extra card, and then you play Brand New Beat again, and now that's the 5th play of this turn. And now you can also use that effect of Brand New Beat that you have to bury it and give a follower +1/+1 in stats, and then the draw effect also procs because you banished a magical item this turn, and that effect is not once per turn. This also combines really well with Shibuya Rin as well, because for example, due to Goddess by the Sunlight always recovering you play points, you basically do have the leeway, especially on later turns, to play Shibuya Rin as your 3/3 Storm that can give herself an extra attack as well, that will then be buffed by the Anastasia. And because Shibuya Rin gives something else Storm that has 3 or less attack originally, as long as you play her before Anastasia's buff comes in, you can give the Azuki Momoi the Storm, and that way you're going to have at least 6 damage Storm already, but if you then get the buff from Anastasia, you're actually getting 8 damage Storm off the bat. There's also really good synergy with Otohamu Umeki, who's a 2-cost 1/3 that whenever you play a card, deals 1 damage to an enemy follower. So if you just have like Otoha Umeki on board from the beginning, you can cycle through all these cards with Anastasia, or just like all these cards that like recover play points and stuff, and just take out a bunch of your opponent's things on board as well. Other than that, we just kind of play the other good consistency cards, especially Layla is so good in this deck because, I don't know if you noticed, but Anastasia is a cool and Kitami Yuzu is a passion. So these are like 2 of your core pieces for this deck that you can immediately search off from the Layla while you build up time and find pieces for the combo turn. So I do really think this deck was super cool, so I highly recommend messing messing around with it. Again, you can check out Rigze's video. Now that you know what all the effects do, you can just kind of watch how he plays out the guides and like example turns. There's really a lot to learn from his video, so I really recommend you guys check it out. You can even leave a comment and say that DifferentFight brought you there. That'd be pretty cool too. And with that is enough of Idol Master now, all right? I know that those of you waiting for the actual classes have been waiting and waiting, but these decks I think you really should know, especially the different cool builds and Combo Idol Master, as well as Cute. I think those four are really going to be quite common. And Passion, honestly, like the English side has been so unpredictable with tournament results that I feel like we could even see some Passion tops as well. Anyway, let's go to the classes. Forestcraft, we have just one deck to feature that continues to be very strong, and it is Amataz, but there are some adaptations. Anastasia is literally made for this class. I mean, it's just too good, right? You play Anastasia, you play yourself a Sukuna, then you bounce it with Nature's Guidance. You already have your 2 play points refunded. Then you can combine it with like Elf Song while going on a wide board. Also, just because of like Fairy Wisps existing, you can set up a bunch of Fairy Wisps for your Anastasia turn and then do like Amataz. And so now your Amataz is giving, you know, 2 of your Pixie followers Storm, but if you buff them not just from the Amataz but also from the Anastasia, you have even more ways to deliver lethal. And Anastasia will just get stronger in the future, so this build for Forest did pretty well during this meta. But watch this space. Set 7, Forest is going to be very good, and set 8 is where Anastasia is really going to shine. Moving on to Sword, we have a very different list this time that I've talked about before, which is Control Sword. So why is Sword being Control all of a sudden? Well, there was a pretty cool card in set 4 called Armor of the Stars that gives a follower on your field +1/+2 and Aura. And there's a pretty strong follower in this set, which is Sakuma Mayu, who is a 3-cost 3/4 with Assail, Bane, and Drain. If you give something with Assail, Bane, and Drain a bunch of stats and Aura, you're going to have a bit of a situation on your hands because she's taking out anything she attacks into, she's healing you, she's also assailing into standing things, and she can be taken out by targeting effects basically. And there's also the Igarashi Kyoko, who is a 7-cost 6/7 that heals you later 3 on Fanfare and draws 2 cards with a ward body. And if you pay 1, she becomes a 7/8 that selects an enemy follower in the field and engages it or refreshes it, which means that you can basically refresh an opponent's ward, or you can engage an opponent's follower that you want to trade into, and she doesn't take damage when she's evolves for this turn, so she's chilling. So overall, you can just kind of like play out this more long game plan. You have more healing now, so you can use Leonidas a bit more consistently as well. Quick Draw Maven is quite good now too, being a 4/4 that basically deals 5 to something. It's pretty good for this specific like Idolmaster meta in general, so definitely give it a try. I think Control Sword is a pretty cool deck. For Rune, some of you may have noticed this is the exact same list as the one featured in the previous set's competitive decks. Koan just continues to be the best Rune deck. I did ask the staff of the Evolve team, I was like, do you want me to feature a list with Idolmaster cards more? I was like, I'm gonna be honest, it's gonna be weaker than this one, so do you want that? They're like, nah, it's fine. Just show the good old tried and tested Kuan. I was like, I'm glad we agree. I'm glad we see eye to eye. So yeah, this is still Nini's Kuan list that, if anything, this is the list that won during the Idolmaster meta, so it's even better now. And then we have my dear beloved Galmu. This is the list, more or less the list that I used at the GP Chiba, my proudest Evolve video of all time, which is the GP Chiba video. I do a very in-depth analysis of the deck there and how it answers the meta, so if you really want to hear me talk a lot and yap a lot more than I do in this video, please do check it out. But basically, Sagisawa Fumika is just a huge support for Galmu because you get to search out Apostle and Disciple from her search. You don't get the damage because they're not Idolmaster followers, but that means that Disciple activates Apostle immediately for the storm damage, and if you have an extra play point or like an EP or something, you can use it to evolve. You can also search Prime Dragon Keeper and Phylene, which means that you're doing more damage, this time from the Prime Dragon Keeper. Phylene's Fanfare will also proc because you're in overflow to search out the White Frost Whisper. You can technically search out Draconier as well if you need to take out something a bit more tall. So overall, she's a really good match into the deck, and like once games go long, you can definitely just play her out. Whether you play 3 or 2, it kind of comes down to preference, I think, and just kind of how aggressive you play this deck. As you see, Bellringer Angel is out of the deck now, and there's still no Oracle. So instead of Dragon Summoner, you can technically use that space there, but I feel like every single other card in this deck is pretty vital, so I wouldn't really touch that space too much. But anyway, I'll leave in the link in the description to my GP Chiba video. I really dive super deep into how this deck answers the Idolmaster meta, or how it adapts to it rather, and why I brought it. So definitely watch that if you are a fellow Galmu fanatic. Next up is arguably the deck I hate playing against the most, that I have to admit is undeniably very strong. That is Control Abyss. Where are all these control decks coming from? Control Abyss definitely changed a little bit since last time. I mean, we still have like Ginsetsu and Mr. Rulanai in here and Marzensky and all that stuff, but there's some really powerful new cards. Most importantly, Whispers of a Dream is going to be in like every single Abyss deck for a very long time. It's just way too strong. A 2-cost quick spell that destroys an enemy follower that costs 3 or less and mills the top card of your deck. Not only does it set up for your own necrocharge effects, but it also just takes out a bunch of annoying attackers. It's like, in the case of Idolmaster, this takes out the Storm Shibuya Rin, which is really strong. For Forest, you're taking out like Rhinoceroaches and like Sukunas and stuff. Against Sword, you're taking out like Disciple of Usurpation. Against Rune, it's a bit less useful, as of course, you know, Kuon and the friends we've made along the way that are his Shikigamis are also, you know, higher cost. And unfortunately as Dragon, it's also kind of annoying because it takes out Apostle, which has Storm too. So overall, you just answer a lot of things in this format, and especially in the next Natura Machina format is going to be even more good because it takes out mono. So anyway, I've gassed the card up enough. It's really good. And the other big inclusion is Kanzaki Ranko. He's a 4-cost 3/3 that on Fanfare deals 2 damage to enemy follower, just like that, which is quite good. And we're going to ignore the lesson effect because you can't use those unless you're playing the Idolmaster class. So if you evolve her for 1, she goes from being a 3/3 to a 4/4 and looks at the top 4 cards of your deck, lets you put 1 into the EX area and the rest get buried. So this is really good for just like getting into a necrocharge nice and fast, while also basically drawing a card, right? Your EX area is basically just a public hand. So it's a really good way to dig for pieces. You know, in a 40 card deck, top 4 is actually quite good. And this also helps to get to Azazel much faster and turn him into a 4-cost once you hit your necrocharge 10, which is pretty quick in this case, right? You get to fire off the Kanzaki Ranko like on turn 4 going second or like turn 5 going first. So you can pair it into Azazel pretty quickly on like going second, turn 5 or something, right? But yeah, this deck is really annoying. Honestly, Israfil is like one of the biggest MVPs of this deck in my opinion, because at some point you just reach this, like you have so much removal now. The deck's reduced a little bit of the hand hate, but just paired with the removal and the sustain that you have, Israfil just becomes so annoying late game. I'm saying this as a dragon main for the most part. So good luck to everyone playing against this deck, and Abyss mains, you are in for a pretty strong deck this meta. And finally, a deck that I've been hoping to be able to talk about for a while is the Ward Haven. This deck in particular went 12-4, so 12 wins, 4 losses at GP Chiba. So it was basically like 1 win away from top 32. I think it ended like top 64. So honestly, very close to top cut contention. And I feel like it's a deck that we already talked about last time around. You know, Wilbert was a really big addition, being a, you know, just ward searcher that also gives you a bit of that like damage throughout the game. And you know, just a ward game plan in general does mean that you are stalling out the game pretty well. Octo Bishop, you know, is like a card that's pretty cool, lets you heal at the start of each end phase while being a 4/4 with ward. But of course the big addition here is the Kaede. Takagaki Kaede. She is a 5-cost 3/5 with ward that banishes an enemy follower on play, which is really good, just like spot on removal. You know, Priest of the Cudgel, we had to like evolve and like dedicate the evolve deck slots for that, but this just does it on Fanfare. And what's even better is that at the start of your end phase, if you've been really chipped down, especially in this meta where you're gonna have to play against like aggressive cool Idolmaster a lot, you'll be able to heal your leader 5 and draw a card if your leader's defense is 5 or less at the start of your end phase. And healing 5 is usually like a pretty big comeback, right? There's not that many decks that can like dish out a whole 11 damage in one turn. Of course there are, especially going forward there will be more, but especially in this specific format is definitely a very strong comeback mechanic. And that's gonna be it. So it took a long time to talk about a lot of the Idolmaster decks, and I definitely kind of just like went quickly through the other classes. But of course for the other classes it's mostly just old decks kind of getting updated. Next set is gonna be the polar opposite. We're gonna put down the collab decks, and that's why I wanted to spend so much time on IMAS this time, because next set is probably gonna be one of the most high quality sets for all the classes in terms of how many decks come out of it just being super strong. Some of you that follow me on X, formerly Twitter, will remember that I used to share like around this time last year the pie charts from the set 7 meta, and it was basically like the perfect pie chart where each class had the exact same portion of the pie chart. It was beautiful, so definitely look forward to that. But the Idolmaster meta I personally look back to really fondly. I'm not someone that's actually into the Idolmaster series at all. Like I've heard some songs here and there, but I never like play the games or anything, and so a lot of these characters are just kind of new because I have friends that really love them. But they managed to design some really cool decks, and honestly, like especially having such a cool budget tier 1 deck, especially in Japan, was really nice. And so I definitely have my fingers crossed hoping for the same thing for English. Support your locals, make sure you open a bunch of boxes, and you'll be able to build the Idolmaster decks pretty easily, I'd say. But anyway, that'll be it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, give it a like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe. But otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.